genre is that?
Horror.
Edgar Allan poetry.
Edgar Allan.
Edgar Allan poetry.
Oh,
Little levity. And then when they don't do levity, Pesach. Everything is all levity.
You're on a roll, keep going.
Like a sesame seed. I'm
You're
gonna
gonna be the co-star.
the headliner.
How many puns do you think I have? You saw my opening for the spiel.
How many buns?
How many puns? Not buns, okay. How many puns do you think I've cracked in this building? in the last
Oh, well, you're
15 minutes?
punny, so.
Yeah, I try my best.
But Harry, don't let the lack of an envelope inhibit you from.
No, I've already donated,
Giving
so
to
that's
the
right. You've
appeal.
done a good job. Good on you.
Well, obviously, we had to get the plumbing fixed
Yeah.
in between.
It's out there.
Yeah. Nothing was flushing.
Never tell older guys about plumbing getting fixed.
Sorry. So
Okay.
I took a class over the summer by Rachel Korazin, who is a professor at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. And it's an incredible program, usually in July, that has a lot of clergy, and you study together and learn a lot. And she had been collecting poetry from people who hadn't written anything before. These were all new poets, and they came from all different walks. And she was very impressed. One of the things that I love about these poetry is that Israeli Jews, Israeli Christians, Israeli Arabs learn the Old Testament in their classroom. So they can just pull verses out of the air and insert them into everywhere. So we're going to look at some of these poetry, beginning with Darkness Over the Surface of the Abyss, who's written by Sur Guetta. He was 45 and didn't have time to write poetry before. So his family was in a kibbutz, and most of them didn't survive. He managed to, and he got through his time in the hotel by writing. So, Darkness Over the Surface of the Abyss. My teacher Michal once asked us, who can tell me the meaning of the verse, the earth was chaos and confusion, with darkness over the surface of the abyss? And that's the first line of Bereshit, that the earth was tohu vavohu, it was utter madness, with darkness over the surface of the abyss. All these years, since then to this very day, that question has echoed within me. The teacher's eyes, as she was looking for a raised hand, echoed in me. That all-encompassing silence echoed in me. On October 7th, the ringing telephone echoed in the silent home of my teacher, Michal. It's me, I said. Here's your chaos and confusion. Here's your darkness. Here's your abyss. Goodbye. How do you think he's feeling as he writes this poem?
He's feeling in the abyss. So, oh, this is it. This is what that means.
Yep. And it can't be ordered. He's very angry.
It can't be ordered. In your sermon, you said God
Right.
ordered it. Yeah.
But we as human beings cannot order things in the same way. We can speak them into being as God did. But something as horrible as October 7th, in dealing with the emotions of those who survived, the families of those who didn't survive, and basically what people saw. There's a huge mental health problem in Israel right now, and there's a high rate of suicide among young women who were raped. The pain is too much, and Israel didn't want to acknowledge it at first until they saw it on the GoPros. So the Hamas members were given GoPros to record the whole thing, and they were given the drug Molly which makes everything into a kind of virtual reality. You feel like you're
That's
playing.
one of those action cams.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
So they videoed everything. And then they were able to get back most of the GoPros. They left them. They videoed them taking people and just threw them on the ground.
Just in order to be found.
Yeah, they wanted
They wanted the world to see them.
They wanted the world to see. And one of the things, Israel never posts pictures of war-torn, bodies that have been defiled in horrible ways. Well, Hamas doesn't have a problem. So Israel has a tremendous PR problem. And Hamas, they're discovering, the PR for them is a 35-year-old woman who has a big PR firm in the United States, and most of what she does is using AI or old pictures. So you remember the New York Times with the picture of the hospital blown up?
She made that.
Yeah, Egypt, well, that was an old picture. Egypt took pictures, Jordan took pictures, Israel took pictures, and they all put them out, and all it was the hospital was fine. There were 3 burned out cars where they tried to set off a missile. And so a lot of the things that we see are doctored. And the picture of the man and his son, who are always in pictures.
It's not counteracted. I mean, they let the pictures lie and nobody tries to, push something else and saying it wasn't so. It just, and everybody thinks that's the way it was.
Right.
It almost doesn't matter if you try to deny that it's not real, because once you see the first image, no one ever sees the corrections in the New York Times. You just remember the first thing you see.
Well, it's not only the Times, it's what's on the TVs.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and the news doesn't often get it right. I find CNN to be the worst in telling the news. I remember when I was taking classes in journalism, and CNN didn't put Israel on the map. They had Palestine on the map. And this was in the 90s. So they don't really report.
Deliberate, or they pull up a 1940 map?
I don't know what happened that day.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So Michael Zatz, on page 3, was a Russian immigrant, and he came to the United States at the age of 7. He served in the army, and he had to learn a new language, and he had to learn a new way of life. Once again, I feel like an immigrant child, pretending that I understand, nodding in agreement, shaking my head in disagreement, but everyone around me is speaking another language, one that I had to relearn anew after October 7th Hebrew. So they're speaking a different way in Israel right now. Usually when you come across someone, you say, "How are you doing? Ma shlomech?" How is your peace? And they say, "Beseder, okay," or "Tov, good," or, "Yeh tov, it will be better." Now they respond, "Ein milim," there are no words. And that's huge in Israel, because there are no words to describe what went on and the reaction of the world.
This poem suggests a kind of drawing together, though, a kind of unity. But is that actually what's happening? I mean, with the anger towards the government?
Well, there are 2 sides in Israel right now. There are those who do not support Netanyahu, who want the hostages to go free. And there are those who want Netanyahu to go after every last head of Hamas and Hezbollah and think that that's more important than freeing the hostages. And it's a struggle.
That's the tension.
Yeah, it's a tension. And frankly, I hate to say this, but Israel was partially to blame for the situation. And I hate to blame victims, but it wasn't the victims that knew about this. The government had heard about this for years, that this was planned and it was coming.
Yes.
And the person who was in charge of the IDF was Orthodox and had never served in the army before. And so he got rid of several of the people that were at different checkpoints and said, we don't need them, we're safe. And they weren't safe. Egypt called 20 minutes before. They called the old head of the IDF and said, you're going to be attacked right now. And it was then that they tried to get everything into action and get soldiers down there, but it was too late.
Well, it was Sukkot, right? So,
Simchat Torah.
Simchat Torah. So the military was not on its high alert. There were probably many people.
They had been taken off high alert.
Right. A lot of the rookies were the ones guarding the settlements, the outposts, whatever you call it. So very similar to 9/11 ignorance. That
Right.
had all these inclinations and no one connected the dots.
And no one blamed America for 9/11. No one turned around and said, well, it's your fault you were attacked. And when we tried to counterattack, we all wanted it.
Yeah, we went over it.
Yeah, we went overboard.
Yeah, familiar, it's all very familiar story.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
and that was what, we're in that subsequent war, our war. So,
What I find amazing, only because Netanyahu is a master politician, is that he's had the resurgence in his power. No one's talking about his indictments. And he's strengthened.
Not now.
He's strengthened a bit versus 6 months ago,
Right.
which, I don't know, because Israel realizes they have enemies all around them. And changing leadership, even if you want it, is not necessarily the best thing when you're fighting half a dozen wars. So he's, he's worked the system to his advantage.
Yeah.
yeah,
But it's interesting, in the past couple months, he said that the Orthodox have to serve in the army, and so far there are only 30, but it's going to be made into a law, which will change everything in Israel, because the ultra-Orthodox are not Zionists. They're in the land waiting for the Messiah. They don't care about the land.
So do you know what % of 20-year-olds don't serve because of their religious exemption?
I don't know what percent.
Neither do I.
I was going to say that 9/11 came right to me, and how many other times in history, ours as well as everyone else's, did people look the other way or were not ready for what they should, or ignored warnings that, and as you said, we weren't blamed. We can blame the people who ignored it, but it's not.
Well, there was some blame, but not to the same
Yes, not,
extent.
but it went away.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can't equate the damage of 9/11 to October 7th in Israel and how many people it touched.
And the whole thing with the army is different here now. When people were drafted, every family or knew somebody or was related to somebody. The army was part of our whole country, and everybody knew about it. Now, it's just, what, 1%, 2%?
Right.
And the rest of us really, well, we hear about it, that's too bad, but it's not the same.
No, there are a lot of places where people are suffering. In Darfur, in Somalia, people are starving. And I don't know if it's come to the point where we're just oversaturated with tragedy that we can't, take it anymore or take action anymore.
Just the floods alone, they can't keep up with.
Right.
So,
Right, it's everywhere. I mean, different kinds of trauma. But losing your house and losing members of your family in a storm, is a little bit different than losing members of your family by an armed terrorist who just came in shooting and didn't care. And they were laughing and they were speaking in Hebrew when they got to the Nova Festival, trying to assure the young people there that they were part of the IDF. And so some of the people who were in hiding came out, and they were just knocked down. That's pretty horrific.
So the numbers in Darfur, for example,
Mm-hmm.
are in the hundreds of thousands dying.
Yeah.
But as far as the United Nations is concerned, it's the condemnation goes to Israel 40 years. I mean, the numbers are crazy, no matter how you do it. But in terms of pointing at Jews, to me, that's a striking difference. There are larger horrors happening in several places around the world.
Right.
Even in Yemen, when the Houthis began
Mm-hmm.
running, they killed people like ants. All we hear about Yemen now is that the Houthis are shooting up the canal. But if a Jew, the Jewish state, that's condemnable.
Right.
So that to me is a large-scale indicator of the rise of anti-Semitism, although the United Nations has had that tendency before.
Oh, tremendously.
Yeah, and our country has played the role in all the wars that Israel had in its earlier history to tell them to stop
Right.
before they were finished. And I think in my field, this is the war I'm living through, right? The others were early. We always convince them to stop. Don't go into Egypt. When maybe they should have in order to have finished it earlier. So that's the part of me that wants them to finish it this time, even though I agree with you, Larry, that it's whack-a-mole and it's creating more. But that is the
Kind
central
of no win
tension.
no matter what you do.
So,
Right. And Hamas has built between 250 and 450 miles of tunnels.
yeah, how about that?
Israel always gave money to the Palestinian people through Egypt to help them build up their homes and their schools, to make sure that they got food and water and their living standards were more modern. And instead of giving it to the people, they used it to build the tunnels.
Yeah, of course.
I don't understand that lack of oversight at all. How much concrete got poured with Israel having no clue what was being built?
So I found out about the tunnels 5 years ago, and only because a friend of mine was the American ambassador to Israel. And he shared in a moment that there were huge tunnels that were being built. And I forgot about it.
The cross-border, they thought it was just the ones that sneak through into Gaza.
Yeah, with 2,000 entrance points, going into people's homes, going into hospitals.
Schools, mosques.
Yeah, it's terror. I can't imagine what the hostages are going through. And I pray that there are some left. But also I wonder what they're going to be like when they come back.
Hamas.
Hmm? The hostages.
So the hostages with the trauma.
Or if like the last night, they won't kill them the moment they find them.
Right.
Well, not for nothing. Well, there were many survivors of the Holocaust. Many of them teach through the Center for Holocaust
Yeah.
So there's that, in terms of surviving in something incomprehensible.
Yeah. And people are starting to tell their stories, and people are starting to believe it. You know, after October 7th, the Israeli government did not believe that women were raped and tortured.
How could they know?
It was too much. And we can't even begin to think about how many babies may have been born through that, or what that does to these women, and the scars that everyone bears for life. So if we look at the bottom of the page, The Mothers by Osnat Eldar, an Orthodox woman, 10 children. They are gathering at night, one by one. She whose daughter was abducted and her blood-stained picture doesn't allow her any peace. She whose son fell in battle. She whose children will remain forever in the little safe room in the corner of the house on the kibbutz. She who remained mute on the other end of the line, scratching the horrors into her skin. She who whispered from time to him or to her, I love you. I'm with you. I'm here. Hello? She who wasn't able to say goodbye. She who is holding on to a fragment of a film clip showing him alive. She who woke up on Shabbat with the knowledge of death germinating within her. At night, in my darkened room, there are wandering in circles, drooped shoulders, restless, sleep-crazed. Mothers, if only they could change places with the boy or the girl ready for captivity or death. Mothers not yet used to wandering. They come to me at night, one by one. I'm hugging them with compassion, with longing, absorbing into my body the feelings of guilt, the helplessness, the abyss, and caressing silently their new maternal title imposed upon them. So what is their new maternal title?
Yeah, what is that?
Your future mothers.
They're childless mothers.
Oh, I thought it was that she was referring to herself. Caressing silently their maternal title imposed.
And when you think about, so a lot of the people at Nova took out their phones and made videos before that showed them partying and having a great time. Mom and Dad, I'm having fun here. This is going to be the greatest night. Mom and Dad, I don't know if I'm going to live through this. I want you to know that I love you, and I love everyone in my family with all my heart and with all my soul. And that's it. Those are the last images you have of your child. And you don't know if they're alive or not.
For a year.
And you keep celebrating birthdays and marking time that would have been if they were alive. Well, he would be walking by now. She would be talking. They would have had their 50th anniversary. It's just unbelievable how in a couple hours everything can change. And what do these motherless children try to do?
Trying to live.
They try to live and they try to comfort.
Well, I try to hold on to hope that they'll see the
Yeah.
child again, but getting less and less likely every day.
You know.
They don't want to admit that.
No. We saw that with the couple, I forgot the name, the ones that were on the news a lot, just prior to their son.
Hirsch Goldberg Poland.
They were holding out the hope right up to the very end. And they were forceful spokespersons for that.
And they've continued to speak on behalf of the hostages who remain. Their work is not done. They are people of such strong faith. I have never seen anyone with that amount of faith and hope in the midst of grief and tragedy. You know, her eulogy was like nothing I'd ever heard before when she yelled, "Free, you're finally free." And keep watch out for all of us. None of those young people should have been killed.
Butchered.
Yeah, it's hard to understand that when the land that you thought you lived on forever and that was yours and comfortable isn't. I spoke to the rabbi of 2 of the kibbutzim right afterwards, and I asked her how I could help. And she said, "I'm doing 50 funerals a day." She said, "I can barely go from one funeral to another." And she said, "I don't want to lose my sense of compassion, but we need to get people buried." And I couldn't even imagine doing 50 funerals a day. People who had names and lives, people who are trying to save others.
Babies, children.
Yeah. So this one, "To Run Away," is by the same poet that I spoke about last night, Elchanan Nir, who is an ultra-Orthodox man living in the settlements. And he's crying for a new Torah. The Torah, the scrolls, the prayer, the words, the novel, the poems, everything. We would throw them away in an instant. If only your rage would come to rest. Everything to the fire, everything right now. The wedding albums, the china plates edged with the silver from Grandma. The simple drawings of houses from Dina's kindergarten, all with a red roof and no floor. We have no time left. They're coming. You can hear their power. They've breached everything. The fences, the wall, the towers, they desecrated the oil. Tell us, when are you coming? Quick, be stronger. Everything is going up in smoke. Look, we're here. We have nowhere else to run. So he's angry at God and saying, where are you? And, you know, they desecrated the oil. That goes back to the destruction of the temple when they had to rededicate it on Hanukkah. And they've breached everything. You can hear their power. And we have nowhere left to run, which is a line that Jonah says to God when he figures that he's got to go do what God asked of him in Nineveh. So the ultra-Orthodox are not allowed to question God. And here,
So what's this? My grandmother would say.
yeah,
So what's this?
he's questioning.
I think it is time for what you took from this last time. There's a need to change now. Yes, there is a need to change now. Reading the prayers this morning. I mean, we have a potential government that commits all of those sins that we confess to.
Right.
That has to be forgiven.
Well, the Reform movement came out with a 2-volume machzor, one for Rosh Hashanah, one for Yom Kippur. They are exquisite.
I know the new Mishnah for Shabbat.
Yeah. So they have, like the Mishkan does, they have the prayer, they have transliteration, they have translation, and then they've got poetry, and then around the sides, they've got questions by Rabbi Akiva. You don't have to stay on the page where you are because there are so many different wonderful readings that allow us to do the questioning that we need to do on Yom Kippur, or think about how we step out into the world.
Yeah, right before COVID, there was a sense that, in the reform movement especially, that, synagogues need to become something different because we're in a post-Holocaust. Our synagogues were built as a place for Jews to feel safe and come.
Mhm.
But that was no longer necessary. And here it is.
Right. So this is interesting, but I led a guided meditation on one Shabbat, and there were a lot of different people of a lot of different ages in the synagogue, in the sanctuary, and I asked them to close their eyes and look around them and picture what they wanted their sanctuary to look like. And where were they sitting, and what did it look like around them? Was there light coming in? Were people sitting next to them? Where were the rabbi and the cantor standing? And everyone to the last one said the same thing. They were all sitting in a round room that had light walls, kind of looking like sand. And they were sitting in a circle so that everyone could see each other. And the rabbi and the cantor were one step higher than everyone else in the center, moving around so that we could talk to everyone.
I've seen that.
And it's the old Sephardic synagogues.
Yeah. I've seen it in the Reform Center.
Yeah.
And some resistance, but not an outcry. Just a little time to get used to it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm for that. I hope.
So where's the ark in a temple like that? 'Cause
In the center.
it's only facing half the crowd.
It can be, the ark.
Or
can
is
be
it open
where
all-
is.
It could be a round
Yeah.
arc.
Yeah. It could still be right where it is.
But people wanted a way to see each other and connect with each other and not to look frontally and not to have people speaking at them or singing to them. Yeah. Yeah, and I found that very interesting.
This is a relatively low bima.
It is.
Which feels very intimate because it's one of the lowest that I've seen all over the world.
Yeah. There are lots of them that are much higher, that are marble and gold, and they're not approachable. Like Temple Emmanuel in Manhattan, one of my friends is the senior rabbi, and when we were in rabbinic school, he spoke like a human being. And when he became rabbi of that synagogue, he had to take elocution lessons so that there was no accent, no intonation, that they all had to speak in the same tone. And now it's interesting to speak with him.
Who demands that? The board. Why?
That was the way the temple always was.
Like having a robot.
In a way, it is there. I mean, it's the first, one of the first Reform synagogues in this country. When Reform started in the 1820s in Germany, they wanted it to be like high church. They wanted them to wear the papal hats, and they still do at some synagogues in New York. I was shocked. I was watching a service last week at the Park Avenue Synagogue, and the cantor had invited several Broadway stars who were members of the congregation up to the bima to sing the song from Rent. How many moments?
525,000.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was in the middle of them wearing, he looked like he was dressed as the Pope.
What do they call themselves, conservative or orthodox?
They're conservative. But again, it's very golden. The rabbi speaks with a certain tone. The rabbi is called pastor.
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 That's it. Oh, pastor. Oh, my God.
Like they did in early Reform. In early Reform, we had no Hebrew in our prayer books, only the vernacular. And I spent a summer in Buffalo on a Wexner fellowship. I probably shouldn't mention him anymore. But they had one service a month that was using the First Union Prayer Book. And I had so much trouble leading that services, I could not get my mouth around those words because they didn't feel comfortable. All the these and the thous and the those and the no Hebrew. And we were told to take off our kippot and our talitot. And thank God they only did it once when I was there because it was a challenge. As a modern speaker, we want our prayers to speak to us where we are. And I think that's what, a lot of these poems do.
Oh, for sure. And you're saying that these are not people who identified themselves as poets.
No,
They were moved to do this,
they're all new.
to deal with their experience.
Yeah. Rachel Corazine collected them, and they're in a new poetry book that's called Shiva, with the I as a 7. And they're beautiful poems. There's a rabbi here, Hannah Yerushalmi, who has written 2 volumes of poetry.
Of this type?
She is an American rabbi. She and her husband are in Israel all the time. And when she was there, she felt moved to write poetry, and she had never really written poetry before. And now she writes a poem a day about what life is like in Israel. Seeing a soldier standing across the street from you, and you just want to run over and give him a hug because you're not sure if he has parents or a family anymore. And you feel like he needs a hug. And, how would he feel about that, this 19-year-old who has seen horrors? So it's juxtaposing life with war, which is what they're trying to do in Israel right now. Someone asked me if it was safe to go to Israel. And I would say 100% absolutely. I have always felt safe in Israel. There has not been a time where I haven't, and I was there during bus bombings and cafes blowing up. But you feel safe in so many different ways. So there's, domestic violence in the ultra-Orthodox community. But there's no other kind of violence in Israel. The soldiers aren't given bullets. They're given rubber bullets. And one of my friend's daughter, who was stationed at Gaza, said to me, what am I supposed to do with this bullet? I don't want to have a bullet in this gun. I could kill someone. I want my rubber bullets back. And they transferred her to be a medic because she couldn't do it. They learn Krav Maga, which is a kind of self-defense where they don't have to use weapons. And so you walk around Israel and you see guns all over the place, and then you figure out that they're all loaded with rubber bullets, not with ammunition. And it does make you feel safe. You know that if these kids lose their guns, they go to jail. They have to keep it with them at all times. It's a very different lifestyle there. They know that everyone's going to go into the Army. And there are so many different things that you can do in the Army. And then they pay for your college education afterwards. But, this year was the first year that they had to call up so many miluim, which are soldiers who are done with active duty, who usually report for a weekend someplace and do something, but they had to put on their uniforms and go back and fight this year. And even, yeah,
Talking about being safe in Israel resonates with me personally. Our daughter was in Israel during the Scud missile attacks 12 years ago, whatever it was.
Mhm.
And we were extremely concerned. But I got continual assurances from people that had lived in Israel. It was either Rabbi Orrick or Rabbi Mark, I forgot which one at the time, plus my past rabbi, Brian Beal. He said if there was any danger at all to Americans on birthright, they'd be out of there in a minute.
100%.
Yeah, they did have to change their agenda a little bit, but it was very disconcerting. But my daughter was glad she was there during a memorable time period, if nothing else. And she saw firsthand what it was like for a country to have to survive.
Yeah, watching the news when I lived there for a year, everything seems so far away. If there was a terrorist attack, it was in Haifa.
Right.
Nothing was close. And yet the news here made it seem like it was a much bigger thing. My parents would call constantly, "Oh my God, are you okay? We just heard on the news." I'm like, "I'm watching the news. I haven't heard that." So it's hyped up.
Self papers.
Yeah,
Everything's hyped up.
right now. So I want to look at a prayer, and this will be our last poem by Avital Nadler. When you return, we'll sit just the two of us in the shower. You in the gentle water, and I facing you will gently wash your hair. Erase all your memories. We'll sing to you the song of the hyacinth and of the rain tickling the window. And I will carefully clean between your toes every speck from the tunnels. And I will tell you about the moon that shone so many nights when you weren't here. And I will wipe my tears off your face. The gentle water will wash them away. I will braid your hair, dress you in pajamas, just the two of us in bed, and a caring hug, and hope and love, and fear and prayer, that there may never be a next time. It's a sacred moment of making someone pure again. It's like going into the mikveh. And it's not if they return, it's when, as it is in Israel, when they come home. So there are so many different poems and pieces of artwork that have been created since October 7th. You talk about creativity in the face of terror, and you would not believe some of the they're not scary, they're beautiful pieces of artwork of naked women running away, and you see their hair flowing behind them, of people huddled in the corner of a room. They're putting down on paper what they remember from that day or what they've heard. And in Israel, everyone knows someone who knows someone. On Yom HaZikaron, every school has a tekes, a ceremony, where they say the names of every student who went there who was killed in action. And the list grows longer year by year. But you know everyone. We had a shaliach from Israel who came to my last synagogue, Noach. He was there for a year, teaching the kids about Israel, speaking from the Bima, and he was at the Nova Festival. And they couldn't find him at first. And they finally found him. It turned out that, instead of being shot, he was hit with the butt of a gun against his skull, and it caved in. They were able to get him into a hospital. And his first response when he opened his eyes was, I need to go back. I need to go get my uniform and fight. That's the mentality of Israelis. People wanted to go back to the kibbutz because they had a greenhouse that they had been nurturing for so long. And last week, when some people finally went back to look at the damage, there was a sign from some soldiers, sorry, we didn't mean to go into the greenhouse, but we wanted to water everything because it looked like it was parched.
And there it was.
And there it was. There's still things growing. Days go by.
No, these times we're living through are often unbelievable.
I thought actually by giving the sermon that I gave today that I would get rid of the weight on my shoulders, but nope. It's still there, very heavy.
The greenhouse story is like a classic Tikkun Olam, because there's nothing more symbolic of the earth than vegetation and oceans.
Yeah,
They wanted to save the vegetation.
yep. That these soldiers are walking around at the border and they're still making time to water the plants for the people who are no longer living there, who need to have their kibbutzim, they want their kibbutzim moved, completely moved to a different place. They don't want to go back there. They can't go back there. So on October 7th, a tremendous amount of literature came out. Amir Tibon, who was the first reporter who spoke, who was in a safe room and called his father, who had been a big general in the army, and told him they were stuck. There were guns firing, and his father and his mother got in the car. His father put on his old uniform, took his gun. They picked up people on the way. The father got into another car. The mother kept picking people up and driving them back to Tel Aviv and driving them back to Tel Aviv. And the father was able to get into the safe room and save them. And it's his story. And it's a story of his old brigade getting back together to help save people that day. So people put their lives at risk to help those they didn't know or those they loved.
Courage, there's lots of courage.
Yeah.
That's it.
And there's also a book that I just got. I think it's 150 stories of heroes on that day. And there are people who never thought they would be heroes and still don't think they are. But their stories are incredible. And more will be coming out. And the Nova film will be released to people over a certain age.
You mean from the GoPros?
Yeah,
That someone's making a film
they made a film.
from those captured guys?
Yeah,
Captured, they were left screwed up. Didn't know about
people who were kidnapped,
that. That's coming.
women who were, I hate to say it, but bound and quartered. I mean, the worst that humanity can do.
Butcher.
Yeah.
There were stories that some of those attackers were on drugs purposely.
Yes.
Yes.
They were given Molly, which changes your reality and makes it feel like you're in a video game.
Twilight Zone.
It still doesn't excuse,
No,
but
no.
Yeah. So there will be poems of hope that will be coming out as well. Hopefully, when some of the hostages are coming around to the United States and telling their stories of what it was like to be held captive and how other people helped them survive. So we'll get those stories as well. And we'll help Israel to rebuild. And it won't be a two-state solution right now, but maybe in a couple decades. So thank you.
Thank you.
You said it took Ireland 700 years? I hope
Yes.
that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
No, things don't go that slowly anymore.
We were actually discussing if certain things happened in this country that we would go to Ireland or Scotland. Because Scotland has in Edinburgh a massive synagogue that was built in the 1300s that there are no Jews left in Edinburgh. But they still pay for the upkeep of the synagogue in case people want to go in or in case Jews move back there.
So if Trump wins, that's where we're all going.
I didn't say that.
Oh, I thought I heard.
No, absolutely.
Canada
Thank you.
doesn't want us.
When were the years that you were in Jerusalem when the bus bombings and the capital? 90s?
92?
I think that's when my daughter was there.
Yeah.
At HEC. She lived across from, had an apartment across from the moment
Oh, wow.
she chose to stay. We said, get home. No, I have a play on in the play next time.
My family actually all came over.
Wasn't very reassuring, was it?
Which Buffalo synagogue?
We went over and got
Temple Beth Zion.
downtown.
Yeah, well, I worked in the downtown,
Right.
but also I didn't work in the suburban one. But Rabbi Ron Friedman was there.
I lived in Buffalo 50 years ago, so it was 6 years, so.
Yeah, it was the longest summer of my life. Although Ron Friedman was extraordinary, but it was a really long summer. There were no young people around.
It's going fast.
Hello again.
Hello again.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
To be
Why
halfway-
not?
halfway between where I went, yeah.
You don't want to be close enough so that we spit on you.
So getting the deja vu from a past email, were you a writer, were you a published writer or poet or something? I thought I read that, I've heard that actually.
I worked, I was the original editor of the Sacred Column. And I picked people to work on it with me. And in the middle of working on it, I had a stroke. And I couldn't communicate. When no one told me I couldn't communicate, so I kept sending them emails and calling them.
An undiagnosed stroke, you didn't realize it?
Oh, no, it was diagnosed, I was in the hospital.
Oh, okay.
But the only thing that was gone, I could speak. I couldn't speak, but I could walk, my body functioned fully. And it wasn't, they said, you can't go to speech pathology because it's not like, it's just locked in there and it'll unlock.
I forgot you told me.
Yeah.
His daughter had a stroke. Oh, man, that's a bad one. Is anybody look at you and say this thing?
Well, I had a big one and then a TA.